And welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and one of my best buddies, Dave Mitchell's here. Dave, of course, is on the front page of Nutrimedical.com, and Dave is not only a top prepper, a top Christian, but probably one of the top real estate brokers here in Southern California. He has all kinds of what I call very innovative in terms of how to get you land and home, and how to get you, as I say, first stage in prepping is to get out of any big city you're in. I don't care which country you're in or which part of the country. I personally think that the best place to prep is in the we call the foothills or mountainous areas of Southern California. Ideal climate, far enough south so you're not getting the radiation plume from Fukushima Daiichi. You're away from you're upwind of any radioactive fallout from nuclear reactors across America, including the reactors in Arizona and elsewhere. You're not near new major fault lines. Believe it or not, fault lines don't carry earthquakes very far here. If you're not on the New Madrid fault line, you're at least 10 miles away. You really won't have hardly any effect at all, no matter what happens. And it's an ideal place for prepping. I tell people if they want to contact Dave to find out to get a home for themselves or their family members, or just get property, whether it's for themselves or for a community, I think of prepping in 3 steps. The first step is basic preps. 98% of things that are going to happen will be real things. You can stay in your own home. You just have to have food, water, self-protection, and some basic things so you know how to take care of yourself. The next level is being able to prep up in your home so you can stay there anywhere from 2 to 6 months. If the disaster lasts longer than 2 to 6 months, you probably have to reform a new community outside of a large city sufficiently far away that you can have people of like mind that can have a whole set of cross skills. And those chances are like 1 or 2% chances over the next 10 to 20 years, but they're real possibilities. So we want to talk about that today, and I want to start off today by kind of going over some news and getting your opinions on it too, Dave. I've got Drudge report open. Of course, Rubio is trying to make it Marco Rubio Monday. The young smiling gentleman that's one of the Republican candidates. And of course, we've got Ted Cruz and all the others. I don't know who's your favorite in terms of Republican runners.
I don't really have a favorite yet.
Yeah, well, none of them are perfect. Rand Paul, to me, is the best. The only thing that I get concerned about, and some people say it's negative, is that he stands up for the state of Israel. Now, I know Israel is a pain in the rump in terms of the way it's acting, but my approach would be completely different than others. I would just annex the whole state of Israel, like Puerto Rico, and make it another state. I would then have the Joint Chiefs of Staff go to sleep at night because they'd be in control. And I think the way we deal with ISIS is we stop, number one, funding them indirectly, and we stop doing business with countries that fund them, such as Qatar and the Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. That's our big problem. And we need to make sure that any country that does business with these countries, we also cut them off too. And I think that would solve the problem. We should also just start making new alliances with Russia. And when we talk with the mullahs, and this deal that, of course, Clinton is that Obama's trying to put through, which Clinton would continue if she got in, which is the Wicked Witch of the West, I call her. It leaves an open end. I like the fact that they're at least being tough enough to say, no, this deal requires compliance, or you're not going to have your sanctions taken off because it's costing them a tremendous amount of money. But the mullahs are basically lying to us, and if we have enough compliance, I don't see a problem with a deal with Iran. I don't think we should be trying to drop nukes on them until we squeeze them harder. I think we should squeeze them a lot harder. It's a good thing that Obama's going. I think what we need to do is make sure the sanctions are even tighter, and make sure that no Muslim country, including Pakistan, that has nukes, that we should be dismantling that nuke plant in Pakistan and realizing that the dangers there, and also not assisting India to get more nukes, which is what Obama's done by making a $182 billion deal there. So there are a lot of things going on. Obama has completely mismanaged our foreign policies. And so far, Rand Paul, I think, is my favorite. He has a lot of similar principles to Ron Paul, but he has a a kind of a more pragmatic approach toward a number of issues which I think are important. He's pro-life, and I think we need to be pro-Israel, believe it or not, even though people get ticked off of that. We can't let them run our foreign policy, but we need to be pro-Israel. And we need to be much more proactive at making it not just a secular Jewish state, but a state for Christians to migrate there. I would personally annex the entire territory from the Euphrates River to the Nile and make it just like the Abrahamic Covenant. I think that what we should do is to take a much more proactive stance toward peace in the area and dissect out and completely annihilate any extreme Islam, so the moderate Muslims could then have, in a sense, a Muslim Reformation and become moderated, just like after the Spanish Inquisition, the Christians no longer decided to torture people to death because they didn't agree with the Pope or his functionaries. What do you think?
Well, I think the Bible says we should definitely support Israel. I know that.
Oh yeah, and I think Rand Paul's my favorite, and his policies and other things in terms of not being proactive but not being in foreign entanglements. I think that he's much more less of a let's bomb him into we call him John McInsane, bomb Iran. How crazy. When we see Hillary Clinton. And I recall having met her personally with Bill Clinton back in Dakota Ridge High School after I took care of the first kid shot in Columbine, Mark Taylor. He was my only pediatric patient. He was the very first one shot in Columbine. And he took a number of bullets, which required him to have 2 14-hour procedures. He had 57 units of blood. And when he came to my offices when I was down in Denver, just south of Denver, he came in, his mom said, I want you to pray for him. And I said, well, I prayed. And, of course, she knew that I had a gift of medical discernment. I said, your son has an abscess, a subphrenic abscess, and I'm going to put him on, at that time, an antibiotic called Levaquin. I said, in 3 days, he's going to call me in a lot of pain, and I'm going to put him in a hospital and drain it. And he called me literally to the hour in agony, so I put him in a hospital, told the radiologist to put a catheter into the abscess. And 3 weeks later, after he got the abscess drained, he still was in trouble, and they were going to cut out 4 ribs and do a pericardiectomy because he got it into his mediastinum, and he had about a 10 to 30% chance that he was going to die in the procedure because he's going to put a 7-hour procedure in the cardiac unit at the hospital in Littleton, Colorado. So I told him I was going to go home at night and I was going to pray all night, so I did. I prayed all night for him, and that morning I came to the hospital really early, about 7 o'clock, and I said, Mark, we're going to go home, because he was scheduled for surgery that day. Just to schedule the operating room was $50,000, let alone the nursing staff and the surgeons, cardiac surgeons. And I put my hands on him and said a prayer, and I asked God, I said, God, you got to show up now. This young man, you have had him survive 2 major surgeries, and he's going to have a witness to tell people about what really happened at Columbine and what's really going on with the violence in schools. And I felt like 1 billion volts of power went through me and my hands, and I said, Mark, I said, it's gone. He looked at me and said, yeah, I know, I feel it's gone. So I went to the nursing desk, and I said, now do a CT scan on him instead of sending him to the operating room. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. I said, look, I'm ordering a CT scan, so do it. So they did. The abscess was gone. So that day, instead of going to the operating room an hour and a half later, he's literally walking with me, hopping and skipping as we left the hospital. So a few weeks later, we had TBN bring out a jet and their private media people to kind of talk to Mark and talk to me about what happened and how that miracle happened. They didn't want to hear about all the other stuff about Columbine, how it was literally a setup, and that we found evidence that Klebold and Harris were involved there. Well, the same thing goes with these elections. So when we got to see private videotapes of Columbine, and in that, and Marine One brought Bill and Hillary Clinton out to Dakota Ridge High School in the year 2000, about a year after the incident. And I got a chance to meet the most evil person that I've ever met on earth, Hillary Rotten Clinton, and I'll explain more when we come back. Your questions, any topic, wealth, health, or anything at all, geopolitics, spirituality.
Friends, this is Alex Jones from MidasResources.com.
I want to complete that story because it's important. we have the announcements, of course, today on Drudge and over the weekend that Hillary Rodham Clinton has announced that she's going to run as the leading Democratic candidate. Now, people need to understand what's going on here. And God, of course, will use the evil things that happen in the world and turn them into good. And the only one that can do that is God. That's why I tell people the most important thing to understand is that unless you have a relationship with God, you can't really do good. And God will use sinners that are willing to listen to God, that are willing to follow orders, to do miraculous things, not because they're miraculous or wonderful, because I'm not, but because we're obedient. That's it. Just wants us to be obedient. And so, Dave, when I met Hillary Clinton, I didn't see just a pantsuited, bland-looking and very cold-faced, middle-aged female back in 2000. I saw in the spirit, a 16-foot Draco reptilian monstrosity. Now, people say, well, how do you see that? I said, because I have second sight. And people think, well, Dr. Diggle, you must be crazy. I said, well, to describe something to someone who's blind and can't see things in the spiritual realm, but anyone who's real sensitive would know that even if they couldn't see it, they could feel it in her presence. This woman is malevolently evil. When you hear the death of Muammar Gaddafi, she cackled on national news about how he had a steel rod shoved up on the side of him, and he was literally impaled on it as they were torturing him to death in a truck before they murdered him, Mr. Muammar Gaddafi, who, by the way, set up a social system for his people in this country that rivaled any other country in the world, where you could get very 0% mortgages, you got free college. You had the first system in the world for primary water, where 75% of the water was primary water, not just aquifers, but primary water underneath the tectonic plates, where they drilled deep enough they had 75% of the water was literally causing a rebirth of the deserts. So Hillary Clinton is running as candidate, and I think that people need to understand what we're doing here is we're trying to not only resurrect your physical health, but also your spiritual health, and we want people to be ready. I've suffered a lot of persecution, not only from colleagues, but family and other who they don't want to hear the bad news. It's bad news to hear all the stuff that's going to happen. But really the good news, which is the gospel, is Jesus is coming back. God's coming back to fix this mess. But he's going to first fix it through us. And the first stage of that fixing is, number one, to prepare. I mean, God doesn't want to have unprepared people. So, Dave, first step in preparing is real estate. You have to get out of the big cities. How do you help somebody to get out of a big city when you know you got people like Hillary Clinton running, and you've got a lot of circumstances in the world are pretty awful. I mean, if you just look at them honestly, even if you don't include religion in it, you'd have to say that our human race is terminal. So, what do you say to people that say, "Look, my son needs a home, or I want to move out of a big city like Los Angeles. I want to have a place to live in that I can start to grow some food, have some fruit and nut trees, and some greenhouses and some other things." What do you tell them?
Well, there's a number of different ways you can go as far as properties. I mean, you certainly want to look for something that has a good amount of water and a good well. If
they already have one proven, that's good. And if they don't, you can use ground-penetrating radar. Yeah, what else?
You have to be able to put a septic on the property if it's a vacant land you're working with. And
right.
And of course, you can go with power or solar.
Or if you have running water, you can put, like John Moore has put on his property, and I think he's in North Carolina. He has a generator that runs and actually flowing water is one of the best ways to generate continuous power. It's very good. So if you got a small stream that runs the whole year, it's even better than solar or gas or anything. You can put a solar, and of course we have lots of new power systems too. I personally have a Generac 20 kilowatt generator, which I think in terms of entry price is the best price in terms of comparing to solar or anything else. So you can get a 20, or if you have a number of homes, a larger generator, and you can put it on propane or liquid natural gas, and that's excellent. And of course, at some point, we're going to have the ability out of Sweden to have basically solar hydrogen. So we take hydrogen and then put it in tanks that adsorb it, so it's not like the Hindenburg. And you could run all your power off it and even gas up your car with hydrogen gas, as well as batteries, using these new lithium polymer batteries like Tesla. So there's no excuse for people not having backup power. But I tell people, septic is kind of an interesting thing too, because in any city, not only in America but around the Western world, they all have backup power for the water, but they don't have for sewage. So by the fourth day, they actually have to cut the water back, because otherwise the sewage will back up in everybody's home. So you end up with water rationing, not because there isn't water power to pump the water, even if there's plenty of water. You can be in an area that has tons of water, let's say like Portland, but in the city, if you don't have backup power for the sewage, you have to cut the waterway back, or you'll back up sewage into people's homes. Interesting. Unless you're on septic field, and then there's no problem. Interesting, eh?
Yes. In fact, as far as housing, something like a fifth wheel or an RV, I know if you look around between, say, Thanksgiving and Christmas, you can find incredible deals on it, because people always want to sell things, but they don't really want to buy around that time of the year.
If you were to say, Dave, if you were to say what was different about the way you approach it, you're not just a real estate person, you're a real estate broker, and you've been at this business a very long time. You've helped people not only move all over the country, but move to here from other countries. I personally think that people should consider, prepping and staying in America rather than heading out to Ecuador or Patagonia. And by the way, Patagonia is getting a little blasted with a lot of high-level ultraviolet radiation, because the ozone hole is dramatically getting bigger in the southern hemisphere. And what would you say to people? What distinguishes your brokerage real estate business to make it superior to going to someone else in terms of what you're going to offer them?
Well, probably very few agents have lived in a rural area where they have learned all things about wells and septics and growing different things. I mean, we have a lot of fruit trees, pear trees.
In other words, you're the real estate broker for anybody who wants to get out of a city. And I tell people, you can sell basically anywhere in California. I think you've sold homes all the way up to Paso Robles, yes. California, which is pretty far north. I think that's further north than even San Francisco, isn't it?
It's kind of between San Francisco and LA.
Yeah, that's quite a far north. And of course, if there are other parts of the country. And as I've already said, you want to be upwind. You also want to have good water supply. You want to have continuous sunlight. You want to be as far south as you can in the United States, in the continental United States. But you don't want to be in desert area, and you don't want to have high humidity or alligators or pythons like Florida or southern Texas, or in an area that's desertified. You want to have some rainfall. You don't have to have a lot. For example, I discovered that our home with 5,000 square foot roof, if you used all of our roof, we could collect a tremendous amount of water if you have large enough tanks that can last for months and months. So if you want to contact Dave and get more information on his amazing talents to get you out of these big cities into a wonderful peripheral community, either for your own home to prep or for a large prepper community, Dave's at 619-990-6050. Here in Southern California, San Diego County, 619-990-6050. We'll be back in a minute with Dave and your questions on any topic. We're going to cover more news.
Now you may have heard.
We're still talking about some other major issues here. Fukushima is a big issue, and we talked about this the other day, Dave, on Friday. People should understand that we do not get any significant airborne radiation here in Southern California. A lot of people will assume because they're on the West Coast. No. It's hitting, the Kuroshio current is hitting southern British Columbia. It's heading over the Rocky Mountains, and it's diving down toward the Midwest of the United States and then heading back up toward the Northeast. They're getting blasted. It's also going transpolar over the poles, so it even hits Eastern Europe. And a couple of years ago, they had a report, and they thought it was radiation released from a local Chernobyl-style reactor in one of the former Soviet states that had these old Chernobyl reactors, and it wasn't. But people should understand Fukushima is getting considerably worse. Being as far south as you can is a really good idea, and being as far west as you can is a good idea. Just don't eat local seafood, and if you do, believe it or not, a lot of the seafood, even in Alaska, is still good, because the current, very little of that current is actually getting up to Alaska. The reports we have so far is that, yes, it's affecting fish along the British Columbia coast, but Alaska's quite a ways north. And by that time, the current is actually curved back and heading back toward Japan. Interesting, eh? The people who are getting blasted, too, are also include the Chinese. They're getting hit with quite a bit of radiation. Within 7 weeks of the Fukushima Daiichi 4 years ago, 22 provinces in China reported the radiation detection was quite a bit above normal. So people should be aware of that. In terms of looking at some of the other major news items, let's just start off with talking about prepping. When people contact you, Dave, what they need to do is realize that it's going to be a learning curve. For example, just to get my greenhouse working perfect, and I've had it, working pretty good, substandard, but now I finally have it tuned where you want to have a greenhouse. And the primary reason why you want a greenhouse, even in a climate like this, it's good, where you can still grow things outside, is the critters will eat all your food. And unless you've got really good fencing around, which is darn near impossible, a greenhouse is going to protect it. And also you can protect it from cold nights if you're at a higher altitude, like if you're up in your area. I think you're up in, what's the part of the county it's called?
East San Diego County.
Yeah, it can be a little high. I think you're up on, 3,000 feet or so?
Up close, we're about 2,700.
Yeah, and there you can have cooler nights, and you want to make sure that your greenhouse, you want an automatic watering system, and I like earth boxes. You want to make sure that you have a water filter system, and you can add fertilizer to that water system so you can remineralize your food. We've used in the past some of these other special mineralizers. I like the actual use of of our MG12 oils. The MG12 oils, believe it or not, the magnesium and the trace elements from the Dead Sea are one of the best ways to fertilize your food. You can put a little bit of that liquid into the fertilizer in the automatic watering system in your greenhouse. And in terms of what you want to grow, things are going to be, you can grow in a 12 by 20 greenhouse enough food for about 4 or 5 families. And because of the climate down here, you can grow it literally year round. And fruit and nut trees, you want to be able to have fruit and nuts that will be in season different times throughout the year, so you always have fresh citrus, fresh nuts, fresh pomegranate. And when we first moved here 7 years ago, one of the first things we did was put in fruit and nut trees, and they're in full bloom all the time. Of course, there were existing lemon and lime, so anytime you want a fresh citrus, you just go to your yard and pick them. And I tell people one of the things you should also consider is having chickens to lay eggs. And how you did this as well, Dave. How did you set up your chicken situation for your property?
Well, I have a pretty good-sized fenced yard for the chickens, and because I have a couple dogs, the coyotes never bother them. I've never had a problem with a coyote. Had a problem with a hawk one time, got in the hen house, but fortunately we saw him and chased him out. But in fact, the worst predators are their own dogs, because they want to get them. So you
that's
just
funny.
have to make sure.
So as long as you have a kind of like a dog run around chicken yard, and of course you want the chickens to get out and actually peck around and get insects and everything else in the wild. You don't want them panned in like these stupid places. And the most important thing is just eggs. Now, occasionally you can also have chicken meat itself too. But I tell people you need to get enough protein, and you need to be prepared for the fact that there could be a cultural collapse. People say, a lot of time you're going to get a lot of persecution from your friends and family and people, and think, well, why are you, ruining my life by telling me that the world's going to end? I say, it's not going to end, but it's going to get messy. I mean, people in Nazi Germany, when the things collapsed, and many millions of people died, including their relatives, they probably never thought back in the 1920s that through the 1940s they were going to go through the horror and hell they did after the First World War was over. They never thought after World War II, a lot of people that, war couldn't break out again, or there could be economic chaos, but it happens. And some of the worst people are actually your friends and relatives and coworkers that say, why be so negative? It's not being negative. It's actually being very positive, because you're proactive, even if it's a little temporary thing. Like, we had the power go out here back in, I think it was November of 2011. Remember when that power went out? It was only about 8 or 10 hours, wasn't it? We had somebody had a few keystrokes in Yuma, Arizona, on a keypad controlling the power grid, and the nuclear reactors that went offline in Arizona, but it also caused a surge that caused the automatic hot shutdown of the San Onofre nuclear plant. And once you get a hot shutdown, you can't reboot your plant, so you're out for at least 3 days before you reboot it. And it actually burned out the Mitsubishi Heavy Industries steam turbines. 800 million apiece. Boom. And these are brand new. I mean, they were in there, some of them less than a year or just over a year. The 2 steam turbines were actually burnt out by that surge. So that nuclear reactor now is inoperative, and they have it in a constant maintenance status. So it's really, really easy. Just last week, we had a nuclear reactor go out. We talked about this on Thursday near Washington, D.C. They had to evacuate the White House because they thought it might have been, quote, terrorism. But it was actually just a step-down transformer that exploded because it built too much hydrogen over top of the oil and the step-down transformer, and it exploded. And it caused a blackout, what's called a hot shutdown of the nuclear reactor that supplied power to the Washington, D.C. area and the White House. So when people say this can't happen, if you break things down to its elemental parts like I do with the human body, and you use science and logic, you realize, like, things are pretty fragile, aren't they? I mean, our very high-tech sort of civilization depended on things like lights to turn on and off to control traffic, and our cell phones and our Wi-Fi network. Like right now, I'm in my studio where I have a 4G card set up, and I have a special WLAN antenna so my access can connect, so I can talk anywhere in America or anywhere in the world, actually, if I've got internet. It's very fragile. Without all these technical chains and this link, things break down. Cars don't get gasoline. Groceries don't get delivered to the grocery store. Water power is backed up only by emergency water power storage. Emergency services are overwhelmed, so if you have a minor or even major emergency, you may not get EMTs, so you have to have those skill sets and have some equipment to deal with wounds and broken bones and lacerations and burns and accidental things like fires. Well, how do you approach the issue of fire? Because remember, we had those special fire retardant gentlemen here using the fire retardants, and we'll bring them back on the program to talk about it. How do you approach the whole issue of emergencies and fire, Dave?
Well, first of all, we have gravity flow water, so if we lose our power, we still have water. We have a 100-gallon-a-minute pump that we could stick in our swimming pool, and we have 14,000 gallons there. And then I've talked to different firemen, and they said the best way to protect your house is to put 5-gallon buckets about every 10 feet around the house and fill them half full. And then if an ember catches anything on fire, you toss the water on it and put it out.
Yeah, and of course we have that fire retardant we talked about that's made from the same materials they put in baby diapers, and we'll be bringing those extras back on the program to talk about it. People need to prep. They need to be ready for the small things where the power's out for 6 hours, or the cars don't get gas for 3 days to a week, or the civil disruption because of a natural disaster like an earthquake like in L.A.
What if Americans could have A, better health, B, a lower incidence?
Let her win. They're going to probably try to select somebody. They probably want to try to push somebody that's a Republican Party favorite, like Jeb Bush, which honestly I don't think his take on a lot of issues is real bad. And the other people that they want to push as their party favorites, my guess is it's going to come up to probably Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio. Those are the big 3 front runners. Chris Christie's a little bit too Democratic for Republicans. I think he's a little bit too cozy with Obama. He's got a good personality, but I don't think he's hard on the issues. The best candidate, I think, is probably Rand Paul. That's my feeling. Pro-life, very similar to the principles of Ron Paul. I know that some people think he's too cozy with Israel, but I think we have to stand up with our ally Israel, biblically and otherwise. But we have to also do is we have to get control of those people so they don't kind of haul us into another war by just deciding to go bomb Iran or do other stupid things. But to be honest with you, I think we need to be far more aggressive with the extreme Islam rather than less. We shouldn't be allowing, like Obama, 100,000 roughly every year refugees, they call them, from Somalia and these other countries, and they won't even tell. There's a number of cities selected to literally bring in all these people from places. A lot of them are people that aren't just, quote, Somali refugees. They're going to go back once they're here and fight for ISIS we're tracking in, thousands of Americans that have actually, American citizens now that have come from these countries that are fighting us and against Israel in the Middle East. I think it's ridiculous. As soon as they come back, they immediately should not be monitored. They should go to prison. Because fighting for a foreign enemy, to me, is a treasonous act, and their American citizenship should be revoked. What do you think? What do you think, Dave?
About the...
But the fact that we have Americans that are basically these foreigners like Somalia coming in here, or from other countries in the Mideast. And Obama's got this policy of being sneaky, too. He doesn't tell people. They have selected cities, and they don't know when all of a sudden they're going to dump a number of people. Plus, they get our health care paid by American citizens. They get housing paid by American citizens. They get all kinds of basically, it's like better to be, one of these people being brought in by Obama than a person trying to struggle in the lower middle classes. I think it's beyond ridiculous. To me, it was pretty bad. And the other area I think that we should talk about in terms of what's happening is the climate change issues. And what are you noticing about the climate here? You've been in California for many years, Dave, and it's relatively drier, but we still have plenty of water. Where you are, you have plenty of water supply. But I think a lot of it's doing geoengineering. We're going to be bringing on Mike Murphy and his group regarding the climate change and these issues. In fact, we might get Mike on as early as tomorrow on the program before I head back to California on Wednesday. But we're going to get him in the next week or so. They're actually putting together a lawsuit on geoengineering against the federal government, against the United Nations, for geoengineering the world climate. Here in California, the weather is dry. It's even worse in Texas. And in southern hemisphere, down in Sao Paulo, Brazil, they actually have a disaster now that is in full crisis mode at the moment, where 24 million people, the largest city in the southern hemisphere, now don't have enough water to actually wash properly during the week, or have enough water to even drink in many places, and the cost of water is surging through the ceiling. And it's, bad water is a major cause of medical illness. It contains toxins. They're recycling toilet to tap water. Water supplies are insufficient to maintain cleanliness. It's those circumstances that cause a lot of disease and can make people die of diarrhea and other problems. So it's a big deal. What have you seen in the climate change here in California, Dave?
Well, I have a friend that has chronic fatigue, and he can actually tell when they're spraying the chemtrails just by how he feels. And he's been keeping track of them for like the last 10 years. And then he'll rate them like, heavy day. I mean, sometimes they spray so much that it looks like it's going to rain, but it doesn't.
Well, there's actually, people have to think of chemtrails in three levels. The bottom level is where you spray biological weapons. That research went on in the early 20s even, with the biplanes. Second level is creating cloud creation, which they did when they were over the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Vietnam. And we could easily create clouds. That's nothing, no problem at all, trading clouds. And literally spraying what you call those big trails that look like a hot cross bun in the sky. But the real dangerous ones are what's called nanoparticles that are thorium, strontium, barium, and aluminum nanoparticles that are paramagnetic. And they hit them with a plasma interferometry field to actually create rails in the sky to pull in storm cells and create and move storms around. They can create drought, they can create massive flooding. They can also use it to charge up. A lot of people don't understand this, and I heard other people speak. In fact, I heard Yoichi Shimatsu, one of the journalists, speaking on Rents the other day. Well, they don't understand how those earthquakes sort of triggered off Japan. There wasn't a P wave. We talked about this with Professor McCanney, which means there wasn't a proper signature of an underground oceanic subduction zone that occurred. What can happen when you trigger off an earthquake, you're not using HARP. HARP is old hat. You use space-based plasma interferometry over the area. You create a frequency where you connect with the plasma of the underlying tectonic plates in that area of the country, even over the ocean. The plasma will connect with the sky, which is, there's 5 layers to the magnetic field of the Earth. The first is in the lithosphere, which is the crust of the Earth. The second is the tropospheric level. Then there's 3 layers to the Van Allen radiation belt that go 22,000 miles. What you're doing basically is you're changing the charge between the lithospheric, which connects to the middle and core of the Earth, and the ionosphere. And when you change those layer 1 and 2 plasma interferometry fields, you can actually release energy from earthquakes and volcanoes, and you can actually move weather systems around. So you weaponize the planet. And that's basically how it's done. It's not really difficult. We are the only nation that has all of those components present, but Russia has 2. There's 5 nations that have weather modification technology on Earth right now, 5, in some level or other. We in the Russia are the most advanced. Our systems can also trigger off earthquakes, which we did, I think, 4 or 5 years ago in western China when the Chinese had a giant underground military stockpile getting ready for a major planned invasion of the Middle East at some future date. And by the way, this is planned since the 1950s by Mao Zedong. And he even put it in his Red Book, and he quotes even Revelation 9 when he says that we can raise an army of 200,000. Mao Zedong actually quotes that in his Red Book. Isn't that interesting?
Sure is.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people think, well, we can be persecuted because we raise these issues and we tie it to the Bible, and people say, why would you do that? And I say, well, you have to understand that God's prescient over all these things. And people say, well, why would God permit all these things to happen? I said, God doesn't want automatons. He has to give the period of free will. So not only us, but the one we now call Lucifer. Satan once was not Lucifer. People have to understand there was a pre-Luciferic period where he was created in the image as the most intelligent created being. And he decided in himself that he was so wonderful that he wanted to raise to the north part to become as the Most High. And that's the same sin, basically, that all other sin is. It's all the same archetype. People are narcissistic. They think that they can themselves decide what is good or evil. They want power. They want control. They want their method of doing things and the way they want things done is the only way it should be, and that's the basis for all sin. And that's why Fukushima is not being fixed. Our scientists are hiding themselves. That's why people are not prepping. They want to persecute their relatives for raising these issues because they think, it can't happen, it can't happen. But, what my friends will say that live in the local area, but if the power goes out, I'll know you have food, water, and power. I'm coming to your house. You probably heard that from your friends too, right, Dave?
Oh, yes.
They'll say, I don't believe anything you say. You're a nut. But if it goes out, I'm coming to your place. To get a hold of Dave, to get more information on how to prep on so many different issues, whether you want to get the best property and the best prices and the best honest deals here in Southern California, contact Dave Mitchell, 619-990-6050, 619-990-6050. Coming up tomorrow, Tim Alexander will be back for his typical Hour 3 program. We're going to be doing a lot of open lines tomorrow. We'll hopefully have Mike Murphy on. We're trying to get Bradley Dean on and other major broadcasters here at the Genesis Network. If you have questions on any issues, drop a call to our order line, 888-212-8871. We'll put it on our Friday show coming up this week. Or email us. And take care and take action. First is take care of your health, physical, spiritual, and all of us.
By now, you heard about Bitcoins. But did you know that over 65,000 businesses accept